What is up, everybody? Coming to you from One Bills Drive, the Ad Pro Sports Training Center in Orchard Park. I am Matt Parrino, NYUpSyracuse.com, Buffalo Bills beat reporter, coming to you to talk a little bit 53-man roster projection. I put it out this morning. Great feedback, great discourse from Bills Mafia as usual, and I want to take you guys through it a little bit. And obviously, starting at the most talked about position battle, I think, throughout training camp in the preseason is that the end of the road wide receiver spot, particularly with Duke Williams and Isaiah McKenzie. And I tweeted out last night about how I was kind of going back and forth between the two because I do think, after all, I'll start with I put out 7 wide receivers in the projection. And, the more and more I toiled between the two, I struggled cutting one of them because I think that they're both intriguing prospects, and I think that they both bring different skill sets to the table. You start with Duke Williams, who's that physical, nasty type of receiver who also contributes quite a bit on special teams. He's out there on all the units. If you roster him, you're able to use him in kick coverage and on punt coverage and all types of different scenarios as a run blocker. We've seen it was Pro Football Focus that put out their grades from the Detroit game. He was the top graded run blocker on the entire Bills roster. So he brings that skill set. And then you have Isaiah McKenzie, who brings not only that speedy, gadgety type of receiver and playmaker, but he also brings experience at the NFL level. He came out last year in a short sample size and really showed what he can do as that kind of gadgety guy with a really creative mind like Brian Dable. Asking about Mo Alexander, Bills backers, I will get to that for sure. But I think that, first off, I couldn't decide between the two, so I put them both on the projection. But I could see a scenario where the Bills obviously don't bring 7 receivers on the roster into the season. And in that scenario, I would go with Isaiah McKenzie over Duke Williams because I think that I like his proven ability. And I understand that most people who want Duke Williams on the roster, they're arguing that he brings a different skill set. He's a bigger receiver. He's physical, a red zone threat. But if you check things out with Isaiah McKenzie, he is also a red zone threat in multiple different ways. He had 2 touchdowns on end arounds last season in the red zone, and then again this season. With the first team with Josh Allen last week, another touchdown. Duke Williams obviously blocking on there, but I think that the issue I have with Duke Williams and putting on this roster, as great as he's played in the preseason, is it's preseason. He hasn't proven it at this level. And in a perfect world, I think you'd love to bring him on into the regular season, put him out there, see what he can do against NFL caliber defensive backs, but he hasn't done it yet. Isaiah McKenzie has. And I think that that's where, things get interesting. But I think that, there is a scenario, if you break down this roster, starting from quarterback all the way down, a situation where you could get 7 wide receivers that end up making this roster. It's going to be tough, but we'll go through it here as we get through. If you have any questions, put them up here. I'll try to hit them as we go through, but there was a couple topics I wanted to hit on because there was a lot of good questions when I put that out today. And 2 of the toughest decisions I think that had to be made, and 2 of my toughest cuts, maybe I would say 54 and 55 when I was going through this, was Wyatt Teller, offensive lineman, swing guard, if you will, and defensive end Mike Love. 2 guys that on my original roster projection did make the roster, and because of the fact of keeping 7 receivers and 7 linebackers, which we'll get to that in a little bit, they didn't make the team. But I think if I were to go through this exercise again, the more and more I've thought about it, the more I think that with the uncertainty of Quentin Spain, who's already been injured twice since signing with the Bills throughout the spring, once in the spring and then once last week against Detroit, you're going to need some depth there. The Mitch Morse looks like everything's looking up in terms of him being ready for the opener. He practiced today in 11-on-11 drills. It seems like the team is quietly optimistic about him being back, but 4 concussions in 4 years. I mean, that's nothing to dismiss. So there are some issues here. I think that you like what you have with John Feliciano and Spencer Long in terms of your depth interior offensive line. But as you get into this season, if Mitch Morse isn't available, if Spain's not available, Then you need some guys, underneath them. And I think Teller is that guy that really stands out. I put on the 53-man projection Ryan Bates because he's played so well since coming over from Philly, and he has that possession flexibility, which Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane value so much. He can play all 5 positions on the offensive line. He's been really good at center in a backup role, and he's also playing some tackle as well, which, right now, if you end up with Cody Ford at right guard, you're going to have Ty Nsekhe at right tackle, Deion Dawkins left tackle. You really don't have a swing tackle behind them. So I think it's going to be important to watch in this last preseason game this Thursday here in Buffalo against Minnesota to watch Ryan Bates and the reps that he gets at tackle, because Jerron Jones, Rochester product, who the Bills went out and signed a few weeks ago, he's been playing pretty well at right tackle, and he's going to get some reps on Thursday on the right side and the left side, so he'll be interesting to watch as well. But I think if I were doing this all over again today, I was really toiling back and forth between Williams and McKenzie last night. I think I would cut Williams if I were to put out one more. We'll see how the game goes on Thursday, and definitely try to get Teller on there, maybe Love as well. But the reason I went Mike Love, who I was really thought played really well in the spring, and he's transitioned that into training camp and the preseason, is you can see the evolution of his game as a pass rusher. But Darryl Johnson has flashed as well, and he plays special teams. So I gave him the nod there. I still think Mike Love might be enough under the radar where you might be able to cut him and then bring him back on the practice squad. Wyatt Teller potentially as well. But I think, the more and more I think about it, I saw somebody tweet at me, this is a league that is hungry for offensive linemen, and you're right. I think that if he is cut, that there is the potential for him to be picked up. So I think that you go with the 6 wide receivers and you keep Wyatt Teller and kind of play the game with Mike Love. And that brings me to linebacker. And I did have the Bills keeping 7 linebackers. When I went through it and went back and watched some of the tape, I thought Maurice Alexander's presence from a special teams perspective throughout preseason was undeniable. I mean, he was out there with the first team on punt return, kick return, coverage teams. He made a big impact. But there's a lot of guys throughout this roster that I think if you're going to keep a guy like Patrick DeMarco, who plays a lot of special teams, Duke Williams, who's been out there as well, if you keep a couple of those guys, it allows you to get rid of a few other spots like a Maurice Alexander and Voshon Joseph, who I had on the roster projection just because he's a 5th-round rookie this year. But the more and more I think about it, and the more you look at the body of work and how much he hasn't been able to show, especially compared to 6th-round draft pick Jaquan Johnson, who might be, the biggest surprise of the preseason, the way that he has come on and made plays with kind of a nastiness to him, a physicality, which obviously this coaching staff really likes. And I think as a sidebar, I mean, Sean McDermott continues to find talent in the defensive secondary. You talk about Taron Johnson last year, Levi Wallace as rookies last season that really showed well in 2018 on a team that was kind of rebuilding. And now you fast forward to this season, and Jaquan Johnson has looked like the real deal, and some real depth there now behind Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, with the establishment of Kurt Coleman as that kind of top safety backup, and now with Jaquan Johnson. But I think that puts a lot of pressure on Voshon Joseph in this next game to show that A, he can contribute on special teams, and B, he can make some plays on defense because he's probably going to get some extended time. So I think what they do at this linebacker position is really going to impact some other positions on this team. At running back, I went with TJ Yeldon over Sonoris Perry, and it's a conversation that got going in the media room today. If you have 4 running backs in LaShawn McCoy, Frank Gore, Devin Singletary, and TJ Yeldon, you're really not getting TJ Yeldon on the field, and that's a valid point. But I think you have to remember that TJ Yeldon has played all of the special teams, the last few weeks, first team against the Detroit Lions. So there's a confidence level in him to do that. And then the versatility of his game, the way he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's probably, behind LaShawn McCoy and Gore, probably the most equipped player from a pass protection standpoint, and Devin Singletary kind of still learning that area of the game. I think they went out and signed TJ Yeldon because he is a valuable and dependable depth piece. And Sonoris Perry, who's a special teams standout, just hasn't done enough. He had to turn over or 2 weeks ago. Didn't play a whole lot this last week on the offense. So TJ Yeldon gets the call there. And then finally, I saw a lot of love for Deion Lacey, and it's perfect timing, J-Man. Lacey has made more plays than anyone this summer on special teams, and you're right. He is a guy that I think that showed last year that he's one of the Bills' best special teams players, consistency-wise. But the problem is I just don't think he adds enough value as a linebacker, especially in coverage, where you have a guy like Maurice Alexander, who I initially had on the 53-man projection, who's a former safety, who I think excels a little bit more from a coverage perspective, and he has been in that role ahead of Deion Lacey on that second team throughout the summer. So I think that they obviously want to be better at special teams, but I think that there's going to be a lot of dependence on some of these younger players like a Jaquan Johnson, who's taken a very large role on special teams, and even Robert Foster and Zay Jones, who have been playing a lot of special teams. They're trying a whole bunch of different things because I think that they're going to have a ton of close calls. You go through the first 49-ish players on this roster, and you're sold on it. You know that it's going to be, there's certain guys that are locked in here. But as you get to the bottom there's some guys that are going to not make this team that are probably going to end up on other NFL rosters. So it's a good problem to have. Sean McDermott's excited about it. We have a little bit of an update here in that Corey Carter was just released in the last hour. The Bills made that announcement. They went out and they brought in a linebacker, Jeff Holland, off of waivers from the Arizona Cardinals. But that was a position battle that was talked about at length over the course of the last few months. Corey Bojorquez versus Corey Carter. Carter had the ACL injury last year that cost him his season back in the preseason, and then Corey Bojorquez missed most of the year as well. Now it looks like Corey Bojorquez, who actually quietly had himself a pretty nice game against the Detroit Lions, won himself that punter battle, and if he didn't, still keeping an eye out there. Ryan Allen, the Patriots punter that was released last week, he could be an option as well if the Bills want to go out and try to bring somebody in from the outside, which they did last year. Corey Bojorquez was on the Patriots roster all throughout the preseason last year. They put him on waivers, and the Bills went and picked him up right before the season started and made him their starting punter. I saw a question there about Heath Farwell and how he's kind of doing with his groups, and I think it's a work in progress. I think how you can really evaluate Heath Farwell in his first year is how he's able to develop some of these younger guys that have to play some special teams. I don't know how much special teams Devin Singletary is going to end up playing, but you look at, like I mentioned, Jaquan Joseph, Tommy Sweeney, the tight end who's really popped on the offensive side of the ball. He's going to be asked to do a lot in special teams, and if these guys are able to excel in that part of the game, that allows you somebody just joining in. Hello from Paris. Well, bonjour, if I said that correctly. Thank you for watching. I think that'll be definitely a way to figure things out. Hit me with any questions you have. I'll stay on here for another minute or two as we're going through. We put out the 53-man roster projection. We have one preseason game left to go Thursday night. No starters are going to play, but it's going to be that showcase for guys like Duke Williams and David Sills, and who I think is underwhelmed a little bit, but still a chance for him to go out there, put some good things on tape. And one thing that's interesting, if you go back to last week, no Christian Wade. It didn't get a lot of fanfare. We haven't talked a lot about it. It hasn't even really been in my mentions much. But I know that a lot of Bills fans were super excited about Christian Wade and the way that he was able to perform in his first two games. And I think what happened last week is that Sean McDermott, the coaching staff, dialed things back a little bit for Christian Wade and the mania around his whole situation. And it goes to show that he still has a lot to learn. I think he's going to end up on the practice squad with that free allocated spot that the Bills get to put him on, let him go through an NFL season. And I'd be very interested to see what he brings to the table in training camp next year. For sure, because I think he's learning so much at such a rapid pace right now to go through the entire season without the pressure, learning the game every day, being around veterans like LaShawn McCoy and Frank Gore. I think that's going to do wonders for him. And then you're going to start to talk about next preseason. All right, maybe you up the rep count. You give him some work with the second team. And that maybe then still he'll be less under 30 years old. I think there's a few years of a window there to see what you can get out of Christian Wade. Somebody just asked the 54th man. Right now, I'd say that's Wyatt Teller on the 53-man projection that I put out. As the day has gone out, and I'm a what's the word? I'm a tinkerer. Especially when it comes to fantasy football. I'm always tinkering with my lineup. So I'm going to be tinkering with the 53-man projection throughout the week, and maybe I'll put out another one on Friday when we're able to see this last preseason game. But on this morning's, Wyatt Teller was not on the 53-man roster. I think in hindsight, I'd like to put him out there, put him in there, because I did like a lot of what he did last season. He's been consistent throughout camp this year. I just thought it was more of a numbers game. Somebody asked, who's your O-line right now? So right now I think it's Mitch Morse, Deion Dawkins, Quinton Spain, Cody Ford, Ty Nseke, Ryan Bates, who may surprise some people, undrafted free agent, traded from Philadelphia, and then John Feliciano and Spencer Long. And then I think it comes down to what you want to do with Cody Ford as well. And that's another interesting thing, how this all works out. We haven't really, last week we weren't able to really see what the Bills and this coaching staff, where they're at in terms of this offensive line, because Mitch Morse didn't play and Ty Nseke didn't play. Two projected starters. What they do with Cody Ford, if they don't start him to start the season, he's going to be on the bench, and you have John Feliciano or Spencer Long slotted into that starting right guard spot, that changes things, because then Cody Ford becomes your backup swing tackle. Whoever is not at right guard is your backup interior kind of swing guard, and then Bates is probably your backup center / tackle if you need him, and then you're going to want to bring in Wyatt Teller as well, or hang on to him as well to be that other backup guard. So, unfortunately, we aren't privy to what they're thinking in terms of where this offensive line is. I thought Cody Ford played much better at tackle against the Lions, especially in the run game. I think wherever he lines up, guard, tackle, he is going to be a factor in the run game this season and help improve things. I thought this run game, even though fans probably wanted to see a little bit more passing against the Lions, they were able to establish the run game. 126 yards on the ground, 90-plus for LaShawn McCoy and Frank Gore, and that's important. As you're trying to build some continuity and, fix things from a year ago, to get the running game going like they did last week, I think was encouraging if you're a Bills fan. Yeah, we'll have more this week. It's practice tomorrow. One more before Thursday's game, off day Wednesday, so I'll be back here tomorrow. I'll go live on Periscope once again. I'll answer one more question because this is a good one. What's going on with Ray McCloud? We talked to Ray yesterday, and he's basically embraced the fact that Thursday's game is a showcase not only for the Bills to make this roster, but all the 31 other teams in this league. And I think that we don't get to see everything. We've seen what's happened in the game, but Sean McDermott even made a comment about Robert Foster and the fact that he's made some nice plays in practice while dealing with the turf toe. So there's a whole body of work here that you have to consider when they're making these roster decisions. And Ray McCloud, what he's done in practice, who knows? But I think the confidence level maybe is down a little bit from where it was heading into training camp after a strong spring. I think that the continued production from Isaiah McKenzie hurts Ray McCloud quite a bit. But he is a talented guy. I mean, you saw it. He made a couple plays the other night, one in the return game, and that catch that he made. But even just the hands, the bobble on the catch, and then the other ball that he dropped, I just don't think that there's been enough. Now with this bolstered receiving core, you bring in a guy like John Brown and Cole Beasley, and you still have the holdovers in Zay Jones and Robert Foster, who, by the way, I think both are locks to make this roster. I know some people on social media are a little bit anti-Zay Jones at the moment, but listen, this guy caught 56 balls as a sophomore last year and had 7 touchdowns, led the team in both categories. And, I know the detractors want to bring up the fact that there's 100 targets and only 56 catches, but, it's a learning process. I think a lot of times that, you get a small sample size, like, 2 seasons, where Zay Jones has never had a full off-season program to get himself ready physically for a season. That's number one. And number two, he's a young kid that's just coming into the league trying to figure things out. So I am not prepared to write him off quite yet. I think that this is a very important season. And I think with the additional pieces around him, if he can get things figured out, what his role is, how he fits in best. He already has a chemistry with Josh Allen built last season, Brian Dable built last season. So yeah, I'm interested to see what he can do, and I think he's a lock on this roster. Yeah, Zay will have a breakout season. Many great wide receivers have taken 3 years, and that's a great point by Jack. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This is always so much fun. I've really enjoyed these Periscope sessions recently. We're going to get more of them cranking here as we get, we're almost a week away here. I can't wait to get to New York. A week from Friday, I leave. I will be at that game live to bring you guys all the coverage. Hit me up on social media, at Matt Parrino, obviously here on Twitter. DM me, tweet at me. Let me know what you guys what you want, what kind of Periscope you want. If you want to do some stuff over on Instagram, I'm here for you. Let me know, and we will see you tomorrow. I'll be back because they have practice here again for all your Buffalo Bills content. As always, keep it locked on NYUpSyracuse.com.